Several years ago, Harry Emerson Fosdick wrote a book called On Being a Real Person. I like to translate this title back into a more original form because what it says is on being a genuine fake. The word person is from the Latin persona, and that means something through which sound goes. And it referred originally to the mask worn by actors in the Greco-Roman theater, which was open air, and therefore instead of an electronic sound system, the mask had to be made with a megaphone-like mouth, which would carry the sound. And so at the beginning of a play, you see a list of characters called dramatis personae, the masks of the drama. In other words, the list of the masks that are going to be worn. Now, in a curious transformation of words, we have come to mean when we say a person. The word parson is related, incidentally, to the word person. The parson was the important person in the town. The person. And what was originally the surface has come to mean the reality. And this is perhaps in some way a measure of a loss or of a forgetting of what is our true identity. Common sense, reflected in common speech, reflects the fact that most people living today, both in the East and in the West, feel that they are strangers in the earth. To quote Houseman, I, a stranger and afraid, in a world I never made. We say, I came into this world. We say, you have to face reality. And if we believe in the mythology of 19th century science, we believe that we are rather chancy occurrences in an external world which, insofar as it is beyond, outside human skins, is a perfectly stupid mechanism, largely composed of radioactive gas and rock, gyrating pointlessly and without the slightest concern for our ideas of rationality or for our human systems of value. We are freaks. And therefore, if this be so, our business is to engage in the futile and tragic task of beating this external stupid world into submission to our wills by all the technological forces available to us, knowing that in the end we're not going to succeed, that the task is too big, that it will eventually overwhelm us when the sun goes out, or when some comet knocks us out, or when indeed, through our own lack of control over our own emotional processes, we turn the planet Earth into a star by radioactivity. So this sense, you see, of our own existence is a sense of alienation, a sense of not really belonging in this world at all. I've been terribly interested in how people feel their own existence. I keep probing and questioning, what do you mean? Not only what do you mean, but what do you feel when you use the word I? And the general consensus of civilized people is that I means a center of conscious attention and voluntary action located halfway between the ears and a little way behind the eyes. This is not the same, what you mean by I is not for most people the same thing as the totality of one's physical organism. The organism is felt to be the property of I, or the vehicle of I, in somewhat the same way as an automobile is the vehicle for the driver. So we say, again, how common speech reflects our basic feelings. I have a body. We don't say I am a body. And although we say I think, I talk, I walk, I run, we don't say I beat my heart, I grow my hair, I color my eyes, I shape my bones. We feel a very, very vast gap between certain things that we do on the one hand and certain things that happen to us on the other. And most of us feel that our bodies happen to us. They were given to us by our parents. And so if you admire a particularly beautiful girl and say, gee, you are just so gorgeous, she's liable to say, oh, how like a man you are. All you think about is bodies. Now, I may be beautiful, but my body was given to me by my parents, and I want to be admired for myself and not for my chassis. And so she defines herself as a chauffeur. Disowning her organism. Now, I feel more and more that the central and disastrous problem of Western civilization and of all technical civilization is the confusion of symbol and reality. The mistaking of the word for the physical event which it represents, of money for worth, of menu for dinner, of marriage for love, of law for order, and the person, the mask, for the living organism. Civilization very largely depends upon our skill in using symbols, whether they be words or whether they be numbers or other abstractions. By being able to wrap the earthly globe in a net of lines of latitude and longitude, we can navigate. But we must never for one moment suppose that we can ever wrap a parcel using the equator as a string. It's an imaginary line, and it works to the extent that we realize it is so. And so in the same way, all kinds of symbolic conceptions that we have about life are imaginary, in the same way as the lines of latitude and longitude. But because they are so useful for certain purposes and within certain limits, we become hypnotized by them and we mistake them for reality. Not so long ago, the Senate and Congress of the United States passed an act making it a criminal offense to burn the American flag, with lots of patriotic speeches about Old Glory. And those same representatives are directly responsible by acts of commission or omission for burning up that for which the flag stands, namely the continental geographical United States and the biological organisms living upon it, by failure to correct conservation of forests, to stop the pollution of water and air, and all the other depredations of the physical planet that are going on around us. Because we are a people so absorbed with symbols and with making money that we have no idea how to enjoy wealth. We are distinguished for our miserable cooking and for vastly rich tycoons who go around dressed like undertakers And I've met one of the richest men in this country. I've never come across a more miserable person in his expression and in his terror of the awful things that might happen. Real paranoid. Why, but is he rich? Texas. So in the same way, we confuse our personalities with ourselves. Our mask, our role in life, with who we really are. We don't know who we really are. We think that we are these lonely little creatures that are born into this world, that are victims of a huge trap. We're not responsible for it. We even blame our parents and say, you got me into this mess. You know, when there's a juvenile delinquent, the courts get after it and they say, well, now, the poor boy couldn't help it. His parents were sort of mixed up. And then the press get after the parents and say, we shouldn't condemn the children, we should get after the parents who brought them up so badly. And the parents say, hey, well, now, wait a minute. What about our parents who brought us up so badly? And so they pass the buck. And it goes back and back to Adam and Eve. And you know what happened when God asked Adam, did you eat the fruit of the tree whereof I told thee thou shouldst not eat? And he said, this woman that thou gavest me, she tempted me, and I did eat. And then God looked at Eve, and she said, and he said, well, what about that, baby? And she said, the serpent beguiled me. And God looked at the serpent. The serpent said nothing. But the eye of God that wasn't looking at Eve winked at the serpent. The serpent didn't pass the buck. Because he knew who he was. But we always manage to play the game that we as individual people are just poor little victims of the system. We arrived in this world and we found it was a huge trap that the adults had already arranged before us. And so the blame is passed back and back and back and back and back. And we don't realize that we're not the victims of the past any more than a wake drives the ship. The wake, which is the record of where the ship has been, that is to say, the record of its past, is created by the bow of the ship as it goes through the water. And so we, living in this present, create our past and trail it behind us. It doesn't move us any more than the tail wags the dog. And we have to accept this responsibility. But we can't accept it if we continue with the mythological notion that each one of us is just a person. That is to say, a mask. A John Doe, a Mary Smith, which is something that in other languages called the ego, and which is simply and only the center of our conscious attention and our superficial volition.